Hello, welcome to Draves Archery, dravesarchery.com. We came over here to the St. Louis Boat Show and they got a really cool seminar. And he's going to explain the biological effects and how these Asian carp and how they work and what they're doing. And they're also going to do a cleaning of them and cook them up for us. So stay tuned and watch this video. It'll be really cool.
And secondly, thank you very much for attending our seminar on Asian carp today. So this fish, as many of you probably know, this is a silver carp. Silver carp were brought to the U.S. In the late 70s, early 80s to control water quality in some of our southern states' aquaculture facilities. What the real big problem was, though, is that within these aquaculture facilities, there were a couple of very catastrophic events that caused the water level in those ponds to increase to a point where the silver carp could then breach the levee and then ultimately make it into the feeder streams and creeks that would ultimately lead into the Mississippi River Basin. And that's really how this fish got here. There's a lot of misconceptions about carp. There's actually not any carp that are native to North America. We have 5 of them. We have the big head, the silver, and the silver carp is the one I'm going to predominantly be talking about today. We have grass carp, and then the most recent invader that we're actually starting to see show up in the Mississippi River Basin is the black carp. So all of these fish can pose deleterious effects on our aquatic systems. And for this fish in particular, the reason that it can have such a dramatic effect is because of what it consumes. Silver carp are consuming microscopic plankton out of the water column. And plankton is sort of the foundational basis or sort of the bottom end, really the driver of an entire aquatic food web. Without plankton, the rest of the biota, being fish and other critters that use that aquatic environment, they won't be able to survive. And that's exactly what we're seeing now in the Mississippi River. As a fisheries scientist, I've been really fortunate to have some really good data that was collected prior to the invasion of silver carp. And that data has been continually collected since about 1991. And what we've seen is that since this carp has invaded our waters, there has been an exponential increase in their population. But the big problem, sort of the nightmare of all of this, is that we're seeing a synergistic, simultaneous negative effect or a decrease in abundance of some of our very important native fishes. But why is that happening? Like I said, this fish consumes plankton. And plankton is used at least at one life stage for all of our native fish. I don't care if you're talking about walleye or white bass or crappies or buffalo. All fish will use plankton at some stage of their life. So you can imagine we have this species that's increasing in abundance, and they're very efficient at acquiring that plankton out of the water column. So then what happens is that as the carp abundance goes up, the amount of plankton in the river is going to go down. When the amount of plankton in the river goes down, that ultimately leaves less for our native fishes, which then in turn increases or decreases the survival of our native fishes, which is really the big problem and sort of the whole reason that all of us are here today. Probably the biggest threat that this fish poses right now, at least in the Illinois River Basin, is the threat to the Great Lakes. And I'm sure that everybody's heard about that. And I agree. I agree that that's a very important threat that we need to talk about, discuss, figure out ways that we can minimize their impacts, minimize the chance of them getting into the Great Lakes. But I say that it's more important locally too. We're seeing that this fish is having negative effects locally, and we have to figure out ways that we can reduce or eliminate this fish from our waters. So really, a lot of people ask, well, what's the best way to catch this fish? Because the silver carp and bighead consume plankton, you can't go out there with a bobber and a minnow or a bobber and a night crawler and expect to catch this fish. Because it consumes plankton, a more common approach is that we can either snag these fish very similar to how you would snag a paddlefish, or you can use traditional bow fishing equipment, and that's actually increased in interest a lot as of late. One other thing with this fish, and that I would like to point out, is that this fish has a very high reproductive capacity. It also has super fast growth rates, and it can migrate very long distances. So it can have substantial effects on our food webs. So what our whole point of being here today is for one, the people that maybe aren't the typical recreational person that would be using the river. We're going to show you some stuff for those people that don't typically make it out on the river. We're going to show you what this fish tastes like. We're going to have a tasting just in here in a little bit. But then for those of you that do use the river a bunch, we're actually going to show you how to fillet this fish, because if you do spend any time on the river, you are going to have some encounters with this fish.